S08E28. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host Alex, and with me I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Oh yeah, look, I'm pretty good. Despite what was a pretty boring game to watch on the weekend. But yeah, look, I'm well nonetheless.
Yeah, City tweet out each week, where in the world are you watching the game from? And I always take offense by the fact they stop at Brisbane as the 1 a.m. And I'm like, mate, there are people up watching this game. Like, oh, well, I should say I didn't stay up to watch the game. I actually responded to their tweet this week saying, yeah, from Sydney with a snoozing face, which was definitely what ended up happening. I think I fell asleep about 1:30. So in some ways, I feel thankful that I didn't actually watch this live. You did suffer through it live. I caught the highlights afterwards, but it probably means that you're a bit better placed than me just to talk about general tone of the match. I mean, we saw Ebioe come into the lineup for Pelkers, who frustratingly, and we'll maybe talk about it a bit later, just copped another injury midweek. Ingram the same. So we saw Darlow also making his full debut. And Slater came in for Longman. But what was the general vibe of the match?
It was real weird because it was sort of like Bristol started real good and they had a really good chance real early, but we also seemed to be pushing and getting in behind and created a few early opportunities. One where made me think Ebiawi was on song on the night. I talked to you off air, but he in the corner and had two defenders on him and skinned them both, and then ran into the box. And I thought, here we go. This is what we've been waiting to see from him. But he sort of produced that in a few sporadic patches throughout the match. And his performance was pretty well highlighted by a lack of defensive awareness or effort or something. Just seemed that once it was past him, he sort of wasn't interested. Apart from, I think, might have been whether it was the second half when he was closer to Rosinia maybe, or the first half. But there seemed, unless someone was screaming in his ear, wasn't tracking back too much. But look, I think it was one of those ones where we were under a lot of pressure for long periods of the game, and we were, McLaughlin and Jones were outstanding again, and we held them at bay really, really well. Darlow with a couple of good saves, one particularly that ended up quite lucky that he spilled and then recovered enough to I think end up going out for a corner. But yeah, it was just, but there was lots of I'm sort of all over track, but seemed like a few players were a bit under their regular levels of performance. I think I was talking to Doherty, I thought a bit poor. Simons was good again in that deep lying playmaker role. Simons was good again. I thought Doherty seemed like he was a bit leggy or something. He just wasn't quite on. He was getting out muscled, and his driving runs weren't anywhere near as effective as they sometimes were. What do we got? Greaves and Christie were fine I think all the defenders were good. Like defensively, it was a penalty, which was it a penalty?
I was going to say, was it a penalty? I mean, I sort of looked at it and I thought my first instinct was, first of all, is it even a penalty by the laws of handball, where he's not really making himself bigger, his hands basically by his side or in front of his chest? And then second of all, is it even in the box?
Yeah, look, I didn't think it was I didn't actually, I haven't had a good look at it since, was about 3:30 or something, 3:40 on Sunday morning. But I didn't really think it was a penalty. At live speed, it didn't really seem like anything. You watch the replays, and I think it does hit his hand, but again, I'm sort of like, it's one of those you go take the old school, was it ball to hand or hand to ball, quasi analytics of the scenario, and then he's right on the edge of the box. I don't think his hand's in the box, which means it shouldn't be a penalty. It should be a free kick. If it is a handball, I think it should have been a free kick on the edge of the box. I don't think it was a handball in the box. But it's one of those. It got called. I think I'm not opposed to it being given as a free kick. Maybe a bit upset. I probably have to watch it again, but I'm probably a bit sad. I would say free kick or like making the call, fair enough. I don't think penalty was the right call for it though. But apart from that, right, then so they get the penalty. They had a few good chances, but generally, I think we act like it was very well heading probably for another 0-0. Apart from them getting lucky enough to get awarded a pen, pretty much everything they threw at us, we handled pretty well. And then we even had a couple of decent late chances. Tete hit the post, and there was a bit of a scramble in the box, and that almost had me up and screaming in the wee hours of the morning. But I thought he was really good when he came on. Tete I'm very disappointed that he got himself that 3-match suspension, because I think I look at the impact he has when he comes off the bench, when he's involved and when he's playing, and you go like, I just look and I go, there's extra points that we probably would have got had he been available in some of those 3 games that he missed, because we looked a lot more dangerous with those changes that were made when he came on, and I think Longman at the same time. But yeah, it's hard. Really, realistically, it's pretty boring to watch for long periods. A little bit of interest and excitement, pretty much from the penalty on. But I think, look, probably. I mean, I'm just disappointed that we lost, because I thought it probably should have been a 0-0, and at the very least, like, Tete probably deserved to be able to get that couple of inches to the left and in the bottom corner and make it 1-1.
To get his first City goal. Yeah, he still hasn't scored for us.
Yeah, I just don't think we really deserve to lose. I thought, that we were so resolute defensively and so strong, and then, losing 1-0 to a penalty is probably the shittest way to lose a game. Like, they didn't really break you down and beat you. They
won on a technicality, basically.
They pretty much just like smashed the ball in towards the box, and it's bounced into someone's hand, and you're like,
as Bristol City supporters, I'm sure the saying applies of London buses. You wait for so long for one to come along, and then all of a sudden 2 come along, because they'd gone something like 450 days without a penalty, and got one last week and get one this week. So
I did hear that they said something like it was 430 days or something since they had a penalty, and then they got one the week before against, was it Sunderland or something?
Yeah, maybe? I think so.
Yeah, and then again against us. So, but look,
Traore as well. First appearance for us. What did you make of
that? Look, it was good to. I think the main thing is he was in contention. He came on. He got a run at championship pace, and didn't look out of pace. Looked rusty, but tried to get involved. Didn't really have too many touches, and of those, not any that were super meaningful. But again, he's been out for over a year or something, and then played a couple of maybe only 90 minutes or something for the under 21s over a couple of stints, to then come in and play 15 minutes or something. Did fine. I think he'll good better for the run, and good. I'm looking forward to seeing him build on that in the coming games.
Yeah, I guess from the negatives, we sort of you touched on it at the start of your comments there. Ebioe, I'm never going to get that name right. We're cutting him a lot of slack in his first few appearances, saying maybe he's not up to match fitness, maybe he's just sort of getting up to speed with the way of things. It is starting to become a point of questioning his mentality, perhaps. I don't know if that's too harsh. Sort of, I guess, as you were saying, it's more about his defensive efforts or lack thereof. My worry, I suppose, is that Rosenior was pushing so hard for him to be recruited, is it almost going to become a point of pride's probably the wrong word, but I wonder if Rosenior's going to be a bit resistant to dropping him, and look, maybe he's not, because we saw that he did come off at about 60 minutes in this game. But I'd be very interested to see if he's in the starting 11 come this Friday night/Saturday morning.
Yeah, look, I'd be pretty surprised if he was. I don't think his performance warranted a second start. Like I think we've talked about it a lot with different things, but just like effort is what is the minimum. And I think even Rosenior is saying like he just wants effort. He wants the players to put in. If you don't win, if you scrape out a nil or draw, whatever, but as long as everyone's putting 100% effort into the match, then he'll be satisfied. And he said after this, that wasn't the case with a few players. And I think Ebio is certainly one of those. I'm wondering about whether this was like one of those, we approached for the loan and he was like, no, I don't really want to go to Hull City. And Crystal Palace went, well, you're not going to get any game time here, so you're going to go somewhere. And he went, oh, well, I guess then.
It's interesting, though, because there was all the reported interest from QPR, which is another London club. And you think if that was that interest, and it did seem as if we beat off a few clubs to get his signature. So you think he's chosen to come here to work with Rosenior, similar to Connolly. And you look at Connolly's attitude compared to Ebio's, and it's sort of miles apart. And you do have to think, is it maybe that he's just come up to Hull and he's gone, this is so far north, what have I got myself into? This is not really what I envisaged it as being. And look, this could all be over speculation, and he could just be settling in. It could be other issues. I don't know. But it just seems like you think everything seemed to be really lined up well in January, really organized. We got to the 1st of January. Basically, we'd already, I can't remember if it was the 1st, but it was pretty early in January that we got Connolly across the line. There was all the links to Ebioe at that point. He got injured. It ended up being end of January that we got him. We're now 1st of March. You're thinking, and season's basically over for us. I mean, not mathematically, of course, but basically over for us. And you think, well, what? And I know, for instance, as well, there was all the talk of potentially him coming back next year for a full season loan as well. So you think he's not only playing for his experience and development this year, it's for another loan next year. It's presumably, I mean, Palace wouldn't be impressed with the displays so far either. So it's not as if he can just sort of brush off a 6-month loan where he doesn't really achieve much. So it's a real head scratcher in terms of what ends up happening.
Yeah, look, there must be something. I don't know whether it is something as simple as a bit being homesick or something. Maybe it's the first time away from from the city. Or something, but whatever it is, I'm sure they're working on it, but like he's got to sort it out, because I think the effort is what's not been there, and I think like everything else will come if he just puts the effort in. And I don't know, maybe that's he's showing his effort, and it's just showing a level of naivety about the rigors of the championship, or like what's expected at this at a senior level or whatever, because.
But that's what I find so weird, is because he has played championship before for Derby. He played half a season for them last season, literally. So it's not like he's coming into a new league. It's just, and that was a relegation fight. So it's not even as if he's not used to playing in a team that's not winning every week. So I don't know. Yeah, it's a very weird one. I guess the other one in terms of potentially questioning effort, maybe not so much effort, maybe more fitness, was Tufan also went off at about 60 minutes. I think it might have been the Preston game where we saw him play 90 minutes, but otherwise very rarely, if ever, plays the 90 for a senior. That's another interesting one that I'm sort of keeping an eye on, because it seems like, well, not only is he not really playing Tufan in that sort of central midfield role, he's playing a bit further wide, or a bit more of an attacking role, which doesn't feel like his natural position. But he's not also getting the confidence of a 90-minute performance. So sense from you in terms of Rosenior's attitude or assessment of Tufan?
Look, I thought Tufan against Preston was really good for large
Yeah.
periods of that game. I thought he was quite impressive and involved in some really good stuff, and made some, got on the ball and made some good runs into the attacking third. It sort of felt like, I don't know, maybe it was just one of those games where, because there was a few other players off, like Doherty I mentioned was a bit like off the boil, and so maybe it was one of those where, because the midfield was off, we weren't able to then get the ball out in a useful way for him. He just had limited opportunities. But yeah, I think I'm not sure. It just wasn't quite as effective, or maybe they did their homework and they just knew to be much tighter on him or something. But yeah, look, I think the his 90-minute performance last week, if you're just talking on levels of effort, again, like miles ahead of Ebiawi. Like, he busted himself for 90 minutes last week, and he still did try really hard this week. I wouldn't. I don't. At this point, there was a few periods of time early in the season where you were questioning his attitude and questioning his commitment, but I don't really see that in his performances lately. I think whatever was going on, that the manager changes and all those sorts of things, that's all seems to have settled, and he's working. Obviously, got he's getting. I think seems to have a decent relationship now. That's all sort of settled. I'm just wondering whether, because I know last week he'd come out and spoken about the earthquakes and things, and whether that had sort of he'd sort of hyped himself up, last week, whether there's follow on from that with the cleanup and all that that impacted him through the week or something, or what, I don't know, or that sort of thing, and connected to those sorts of things would be so emotionally draining, and trying to manage that and and your training and your football career and everything at the same time would be I couldn't even imagine how to manage that many emotions and stay stay focused, I suppose, on kicking a ball around a
Yeah.
grass rectangle. But yeah, I think Tufen's, I think he's been good the last few appearances in terms of effort, and I mean last week product as well. This week not so much, but I'd be happy enough for him to start or come off the bench, however he feels.
Yeah. Oh, it's certainly going to be interesting over the off season. I think there's going to be a few decisions on players. I think Tufan certainly, as you say, seems to have settled in quite well now with Rosenia. I will be curious to see if you can start stringing a few more 90-minute performances together, and sort of how that eventuates. Might move on then and get your 3-2-1 votes for this one, and I'll give mine, which were very, very heavily influenced by the highlight package.
I hadn't even thought about this. I thought about it when I was watching the game, but I've forgotten what I was thinking at the time. And I'm trying not to look over at my other monitor to see your votes, because I don't want to just go, oh, those are good ones. 3 points. All right, so I did talk about how good the defense was, and they were really, really good. But I think I'm actually going to give 3 points to Tete for how influential he was when he came on the park. I thought the dynamic of our attack changed so much, and he was able to help hold up and actually connect, a long ball forward, connect back with the midfield and, with the wingers, and actually build some play up, which sort of hadn't happened while he wasn't on the field. So I'm going to give 3 points to Tete. I'm going to give 2 points to Jones for a solid. I think it's been one of those things where both Jones and McLaughlin have been really, really good as a partnership for the last probably about 6 or 8 weeks. They've been really, really solid and McLaughlin's been the one who's been getting lots and lots of plaudits a lot of the time. So I'm just to try and balance it out a little bit, I think I'm going to give 2 points to Jones, and I'm going to give a point to Darlow for what was at times a little bit nervy, but a reasonably solid debut in goal. Only conceded the penalty, whatever. Apart from that, a couple of really good saves, and even the one that was less than convincing, he still recovered enough to deal with. So I'm going to give 3-2-1, Tete, Jones, and Darlow.
Yeah, nice one. I went the other centre back in that pairing for my 3 votes. I went McLaughlin. So, sort of balancing it out between the two there. I do think, it's really interesting when you think back on, I suppose, even last season when McLaughlin came into the side and we started to look a lot more defensively solid. We sort of said over the off season, and it sort of followed with how the recruitment was focused much more on the attack, that our defense is actually a reasonable standard for the division. It was always the attack that needed more work, and I guess that central midfield engine room, I suppose, to protect the back four, because certainly earlier this season we were conceding bags of goals. Largely, I mean, I guess you could argue it was partly because McLaughlin was out of the side, partly because we didn't really have that midfield mix right as well a little bit. So it shows we've got a really solid foundation to build from, which was on display again. I went 2 votes for Tete. I thought he was probably our most promising attacking player off the bench. I was saying before the episode, it'd be great to see if he and Estepinian can start up front together against West Brom this Saturday morning. Would certainly be good to see. And then I went Simons for the 1 vote. I thought another really great display from him. Awesome to see him get back-to-back starts for us in the league. Seri's injury, whilst unfortunate, it's probably come at a really good time for Simons. Now with all this talk as well about the permanent deal as well, was really great. Because I'm sure, I mean, he's a 19-year-old kid. You want to talk about Ebioe's attitude, where he's basically been handed, spots off the bench, starting spot against Bristol City based on not a whole lot of output. Simons has been plugging away in the reserves and on the training track for half a season, gets his chance in the FA Cup, looks brilliant, gets his chance in the league, looks brilliant. Like, he's really seizing his opportunities. So it's chalk and cheese in terms of attitudes of players, and a real credit to Simons as a 19-year-old to be doing that. Is fantastic.
Just one other thing I was just thinking about as you were talking about Darlow as well, was something that I forgot, was his distribution as well, where at times Ingram seems to do a lot of just holding and holding and holding. There was a couple of times where Darlow got it and just sent it straight away, which allowed us to actually try and break, with pace in behind, which, it didn't quite pay off, but the intent was there, and they were decent balls, balls towards the corners that got, Ebiawi or Tufan or Longman or someone in the channel chase, adjust the defense, instead of, where Ingram seems to a lot of the time just, he takes, his 5 or 6 seconds and then he drops it on his foot, and then he plays it to Jones, and then he gets it back, and then he might boot it, and you go, well, they've already dropped into their defensive shape and everything's there. So it was good to see. That was really a real positive as well from Darlow, was just going, let's try and take advantage of some of the chaos. Let's just, every now and then, we'll just send it, and we'll try and, while our wingers are high, we'll send it. We'll try and get him on the break. So that was just, while you're talking about Simon, something that just popped into my head that I thought was worth mentioning.
Yeah, good shout. We sort of flagged it as well with the mention of Pelkas at the start, but I thought maybe we'd talk a bit more about the injury record. And I'd sort of flagged, the question of whether we actually are safe for the season. I think we are. I think I'll actually pull up, we're showing the picture beforehand, a really good graphic that I saw from, I think not the top 20 boys shared it on Twitter the other day, which, basically illustrates that it's giving us basically a 4% chance of relegation, less than 1% chance of the playoff places. And you've got this sort of grouping in the middle here with no dark colouring whatsoever, basically from Preston down to us, where you're basically saying with 12 games to go in this season, not a whole lot to play for, which, as I sort of alluded to last week with Logan, makes for a really interesting end to the season for the podcast. But we will certainly do our best to find interesting elements to be discussing each and every week. But it does mean that, as an interesting element to discuss, Rosenior flagging issues with the injury record this season. And I think, as Rosenior tends to do, he said it's not anyone's fault. And I think it's probably people's fault. I think whether it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the off season in terms of the medical staff, in terms of sports scientists at the club, even lessons learned for Rosenior himself. You look at Ali starting back-to-back games against, was it Birmingham and Wigan, and then shock horror, he gets injured against Wigan. You've got Pelkas coming back from injury, playing in a behind closed doors friendly during the week and gets injured. Things like that, where you think managing minutes better, managing or tracking. I think
Loads.
it's Liverpool or somewhat. Yeah, exactly. The loads of the players. I think it's Liverpool have like a traffic light system where they'll basically say if a player has been playing a lot, but where, based on the statistics and based on the analysis, they're actually still okay, then it's fine. But once they start getting into worrying areas in terms of their bodies, like, I don't know the details, but I think there just needs to be more analysis done on that. I'm sure as well the quality of the training ground is probably something to look into. I don't think it's the highest quality training pitch we've had for years and years and years. Training ground injuries. James Scott, when he signed, I think twisted his ankle the day he signed. Traore, another one. But what's your take?
Snodgrass as well. Step on a sprinkler or something early in his.
Yeah. All the way back to then, you had players constantly getting injured, and I think we've sort of fallen into that trap this season where, well, not trap, but you sort of look at the squad and you go, oh well, when Ali's fit, things will be different. We'll play so well. When Pelkas is back, we'll be so good. But then by then, someone else is going to be injured. Knock on wood, doesn't happen. But Tete or someone's going to go down injured. Like Oscar's pretty much our only attacking player, other than Longman, who I think himself was injured at the start of the season, who hasn't had an injury. So it does seem our biggest, the biggest factor, sort of holding us back at the moment.
Yeah, it has been quite a rough race to run with the amount of injuries we've had. And I think you're absolutely right. There's a point where you can say, like, injuries happen and it's no one's fault. But then also, we're in the level of technology and the analysis that goes into professional sport these days. Even just, from a mug's perspective like ours, to say, go like, there's a trend here in like the amount, the type, the recurrence of these injuries that, someone in your team essentially has made a mistake, or there's been a judgment call that was wrong. And that's like fine if you go, he was touch and go, but we didn't have anyone else, so we had to play him or whatever, and you're fine. But like, I think, as you sort of touched on, with like going, okay, we got to we play the Saturday or whatever, and then it's a behind closed doors friendly a few days later, and you play some of these guys who probably weren't really ready or didn't even need it so much.
Like Ingram starting that and getting like a 3-week injury or something. I'm like, why is Ingram even needing to play in that?
Yeah, he's played 30 games or whatever, like in the championship. Why is that? That feels like a game where it should be like
Lotitala or Darla.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think there's some things that certainly there are questions that deserve to be asked, and obviously Rosine has sort of given a non-answer on it, but it's certainly, as you sort of allude to, something to be that needs to be addressed and considered and reflected on, even now in the run into the end of the season, but especially over the off season, and looking back and doing that review of the season and going, okay, these are the injuries we had. These are when they occurred. This was the recovery process. We had recurrence on, X, Y, and Z's injuries. Because even Ali, they're like, oh, it's a different injury to the other one, but it's like, it's a hamstring, but then it's another hamstring or something. And you're like, how is it like? Yeah. I'm sort of like,
I think there's a bit of buck passing going on with all of it.
Yeah.
So it's no one's fault, and we don't know. And it was like, it's also just like the messaging. Like when Ali went off injured, it was, oh, it's just precautionary. He's not actually injured. And then, actually, it's like a 6-week injury, and then it's actually really more like a 10-week injury. And Pelkas, the way it was covered was, oh, it's just a 1 week strain, and now it's at least a week, and it's like, well, just be a bit more upfront about it. Like, even if you're saying it's at worst a month, and he comes back in 2 weeks, cool, but don't say it's just a couple of days or it's a week, and then it's,
or you just
longer.
I think, or you go like, we haven't had him like assessed properly yet. We just don't know at this stage.
Yeah.
When we know, we'll tell you when we know or whatever, and just fully just avoid the question instead of just
Yeah.
going, oh yeah, he's out for a week, and then go, well, actually he's broken his leg, so he's out for like 12 weeks.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, I get that, but yeah, weird time we find ourselves in at the moment. With, as you sort of were touching on before, we then talked about injuries. We're in limbo where we look pretty safe from relegation, and kind of safe from a promotion fight as well, which is a weird way to put it. But I think I was saying off air, like, mathematically anything's still on the table, and I'm going to just let maths be my guide, because I'd rather live in hope for the remaining 12 games of the season, because why would I follow a football team? I didn't want to have some hope and, ride the ride really. Because if I just accept and you go, well, we're probably not going to do it. 12 games left. We're just middle of the pack. Nothing's going to. Well, why would I? I need something to motivate myself to get up every weekend at 2 a.m. to watch these games. Although we got a nice time slot up this weekend, so that'll be good.
7 a.m. will be good. Yeah.
But yeah, look, I think it's going to be. I think we'll be fine. Like, I probably realistically, we'll finish somewhere similar to where we are now. I think there'll be a few disappointing losses. There'll be 1 or 2 inspiring wins, but I think we'll pick up enough points to do what needs to be done. I can't see us, dropping like a stone down the table in the divisions. But I think, the opposite is also. I mean, pretty much, I guess, as that table highlighted, the opposite is also very unlikely to especially with the run-in that we have with, I think, it's almost exclusively top half teams.
I think so. I think it's just Swansea, Rotherham, and I'm forgetting who the third one was. There was 3 relatively easy teams, and there's Blackburn, who themselves are starting to pick up, and then the rest of them are pretty much top 10 teams.
So yeah, it's a tough run-in, but I will dare to dream for at least a few more weeks until maths fails me. But for now, I'm believing in maths.
Well, we'll talk West Brom in a second then, and we'll first do a round of Who Am I, if you're up for that.
Sure, let's go.
Alrighty, so I have made 85 appearances for City, and I've scored 1 goal.
$85-1.
And thankfully, I'm not a striker. Not a bad shout. Not a bad shout at all. No, it's not Jacob Greaves. I'll give you your second clue, and you'll see that you are quite in the right ballpark. So I joined City in 2020. So that was the same season that Greaves made his City debut. It's not Greaves though. And I'm still at the club, and I'm English. So you'd still be on that track.
I feel like I've just got to am I just shifting over the back line a couple of spots maybe?
You might well be.
I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna make a fool of myself here, but I guess my next guess would be Alfie Jones then.
And you would be correct. Yeah, it's Alfie Jones. 85 appearances, 1 goal for City. We're the number 5 and play at centre back. Yeah, Alfie Jones. Signed from Southampton, and I think from memory initially it was a 1-year deal, which I suspect was because he was dropping down to League One and thought, well, let's just see how this goes, and it's worked out pretty well.
I think because he first came in and he was getting lots of run in that centre defensive mid as well.
Yeah, that's right.
In the centre of midfield, and then I think, was it an injury or something that sort of forced him then?
Must have been was Reece Burke, because Reece Burke was still with us that season, wasn't he?
Yeah, maybe when he left.
Yeah.
Did he leave mid-season?
I think he might have gone to Luton mid-season. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's right. I'd actually completely forgotten about Jones playing midfield because he just doesn't do it much anymore. Because he would have been
No.
another option to, when Seri got injured, to shift him into that role and put Greaves back to centre back. But all the better for Simons. There you go. Okay, well, let's round things off then with a preview of that West Brom game. So as you said, we do have a nice time slot for us Aussies at 7 a.m. Saturday morning. It will be the day after my birthday, so I'll see whether I watch live or on replay, but thankfully we'll have, with our streaming service over here, we'll have a replay up pretty soon after the game finishes to assist with those of us who might sleep in. So it's Carlos Corberán in charge of them after I think it was Steve Bruce in charge when they beat us 5-2 earlier in the season. One of their only wins under Bruce this season, I suspect. But yeah, it's been 6 wins in a row for West Brom against us. So it doesn't make for pretty reading when you reflect on clashes between the two sides. And they do have a wealth of attacking talent that we'll have to be wary of. Jed Wallace has been in pretty good form for them this season after his move from Millwall. Daryl DK took a while to get up and running with a couple of injuries of his own. Scored both goals in their win against Middlesbrough last weekend, it was. So they'll be a pretty stern test. I mean, we talk about the fact we've got a lot of top 10 sides in our run home, and they're definitely one of them.
Yeah, look, it's going to be an interesting games because this is going to be, I guess, it's the first of the real tests in the remainder of the season. Although it's sort of like it's reminiscent of when we played Norwich, we go, this is the test, and then we sort of failed that. I'm just looking for the next test. Go, this is the test, this is the one. But interesting. They've the comments that have come from Corberán, like saying basically like Rogic. I'm just thinking of from an Australian point of view. Rogic, someone who is essentially unlucky. He's not doing anything wrong when he's played. He's played really well, but can't make the first 11, can't make the bench, but is unlucky not to. And you're like, what a position to be in.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be. They've got depth throughout. They're in a position that I envy in a way. The position they're in as a club, really. While realistically they should be higher on the table. They should be pushing, first and second probably. But for what was a really poor start to the season, which they've done really sensationally well to recover from, to the extent that they have.
And because they're really in the same bracket as like your Norwich and your Watfords, where you say like they're underperforming for their wage bill and their quality of depth, I suppose, in the squad. But as you say, like the quality of player that can't even get into their match day squad just speaks to
like a guy who won. How many trophies did he win at Celtic? 12 or something crazy. Like an astronomical amount of trophies that he won at a big, club playing, Champions League and all that sort of stuff. So he's a big signing to come in and not make the match day squads. So especially when he came in and within a few games had scored goals and was getting assists and stuff. Like it's not like he wasn't performing. So I think they're going to be real tough. I probably wouldn't be surprised if they do sort of put a number on us again. But as you said, they're only 2 in their last 5. They're not maybe in the best form. So who knows? Maybe Rosie gives us our boys a bit of a rev, and we come out and very committed to the cause, and everyone grafts and works, and we fight out a 0-0 or jag a 1-0 or something. But I think it's going to be one of those games. We're going to be set up really defensive and try and probably catch them on the counter or something. But
Rosenior got his one and only goal for City against West Brom. So if he can rev them up against anyone, hopefully it's West Brom. But yeah, look, it'll be an interesting game from that perspective. That if we are to get something out of the game, I think it could be a big morale boost to sort of turn around. It's felt like a mini form slump in the fact that we've got no wins in the last 4, even if there is 2 0-0s in there. As you sort of alluded to, that Norwich game is certainly like, I'd hope that Rosenior is basically looking at that and saying that, that was a big test and we failed it. Let's put things right against West Brom. So even if we just see like an improved performance, and that's where I sort of look at. I take your point that it'll probably be quite a defensive lineup, but I also hope that we do give ourselves every chance of getting a result in this one and don't sort of just write it off. So like we were saying earlier, we'd love to see Tete up front with Oscar. How else is that sort of the main change you'd make to the side? Maybe Tete in for Ebioe?
Yeah, I think instead of playing it maybe like a 4-5-1 or 4-3-3, however you want to sort of look at it, probably just switching to a 4-4-2 and just having those two blocks that work really defensively. And then if you got Tete and Oscar, both of those can hold it up, or they can hold up and work together to at least allow the midfielders to work through. It just becomes then a question of how you slot in. I guess like maybe Slater would go maybe to one of those wide spots or something, but like how you then fit in Simons and Doherty and all those sorts of those midfield puzzles sort of changes a bit. But I think something like that might work to our advantage, just in that trying to just hold shop. I think the idea of the 4-3-3 or whatever, having the five across the midfield in theory works, except I don't know. I just feel like we end up with we don't have any. There's sort of no balance going forward. We've either got the five block in the midfield, or we end up with a three front line, and sort of not the right balance.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's why I feel like I want us to be using these games. It was sort of saying earlier, but like I'd want to be using these games to find that right combination and not just sort of say, let's.
Well, I
sort
think
of,
we switched to like a 4-4-2 late
yeah,
in the game on the weekend anyway. I think
and it
once
looked so
Tete came
effective. It
on,
looked
we
so
went
good.
and we switched, sort of dropped some players around and went into that. So
you'd almost say like, why not start this game with the lineup that we
yeah,
finished the last game?
possibly,
Start
yeah.
Longman, start Tete, and basically have that as that. Maybe what you do is you would say, because what you'd have Longman and maybe a two-fan as the two wide players, with Simons and I want to say Doherty maybe centrally, or Slater, maybe Simons and Slater centrally. I don't know.
I think Doherty might be due a rest.
Yeah.
I honestly, he just was a bit meh on the weekend, and it sort of looked like he needs a freshen up, and so sitting having the week and then sitting on the bench and playing 30 minutes late in the game or something might be good for Doherty this week. So I would suggest maybe Longman, two fan, and then Simons and Slater potentially in the middle, something like that would probably work pretty well.
And I know we talked about injuries and not rushing players back. Ali did score in the under 21s during the week. Hopefully means that he's up for a 10, 15-minute cameo off the bench. I probably wouldn't push him, certainly not for a start. But you think, if Traore gets half an hour under his belt in this one, Ali gets some minutes off the bench. If Pelkas really is only a week out injured, you start to, we say it every week, but you start to have a lot of players coming back from injuries now. I think Connolly's due back after the international break as well. So it will be interesting to see how we line up. And I do hope that Rosenia it sort of does shift the formation or does shift the setup so that we can try and make the most of those players, because I think, it will be interesting, because Ajun did come in talking about wanting entertaining football, and it's now 4 games with 1 goal, and that was essentially, it was the opener, but it was essentially a consolation.
The other option, just throwing it out there, would be to go with like a 5-3-2 and slide Greaves inside as part of a back three, bring Elder potentially in as like the left wing back, or play Longman as left wing back or right wing back or something. That sort of job I don't think would mean that two-fan probably wouldn't start. I don't think that would suit him, but he potentially could start more centrally.
Yeah, I was going to say you could throw him into that middle three. Yeah.
But that's, if you were wanting to block it off defensively, having 5 along the back would certainly do that, and then you'd still have your wing backs as a to help with some forward impetus. which would then allow as well as Simons to stay in that deep lying playmaker role and not be sort of shifted into a flat, a pairing in that middle. So I don't know, another alternative potentially, but I don't know which one I prefer because they did look quite good in the 4-4-2 at the end of that game. But yeah,
It'll be interesting. Score prediction for this one?
2-1 to West Brom. I'm going way more conservative than I probably think, but
yeah. I'm gonna say 2-0 West Brom. I think at the moment we're just struggling to find our scoring boots. I really hope that I'm wrong on that one. But it just feels like and I can't even pinpoint what it is that's gone. I mean, it's probably Connolly, I guess, is the answer of what's gone out of the side.
That's what's happened.
It's just the disruption. It's just the constant churning of the lineup and not being able to settle. And that's where when we did beat, was it when we beat Wigan? I think no. What am I thinking? It's the 2 home wins in a row. So it was that Wigan? It was Wigan and Cardiff.
Yeah,
it was the back-to-back wins where we kept the same 11, and you sort of thought, great, we're getting this consistency, we're getting this confident. Oh no, it was QPR. I think was at home, the home win. And you think we're getting this consistency of performance now, and then Connolly got injured, and it all sort of started to unravel, which is a shame. But look, sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just saying that I think Connolly does offer something different to Oscar and Tete in that strike, in that he's got, he's reasonably pacey and wants to get in behind, whereas both Tete and Oscar are more sort of the hold-up players. They don't as much work to get in behind. They're looking to come to and receive and play others off. So I think they work well together, but I think having Connolly's was stretching defenses and allowing other players to do that work because he was looking to get in behind and pulling interest off of Oscar, for example. But he has actually really been missed, which was interesting because there was some of the comments around him coming, like there's very mixed reviews when we signed Connolly. Some people were saying he's great, and then others were, because he had a pretty dry spell in Italy, I think it was, before he came, they went useless. And but I thought he's been a pretty bright spark since he arrived for us.
It's funny how those perceptions work, because Ebioe came in with such a high reputation and Connolly with such a low reputation. It's sort of been a role reversal.
Yeah. So
and was it yourself posing the question a few weeks ago about whether we'd sign Connolly? And
I think so.
And I think I cursed him, didn't I? Because I said, like, what if he doesn't score another goal?
Yeah, well, so it's commentator's curse.
That's it. Well, look, hopefully he's back sooner rather than later. Hopefully we can get that result against West Brom as well. But in the meantime, thank you for joining me, Dan.
Not a problem. I'm always available, just about keen to come on and chat some football. So
too easy. And thanks everyone for listening in. Hopefully we do have a bit more excitement still to come this season before it ends in a couple of months. And we'll be here to talk about it each and every week. So until next time, come on, City.